The night that changed everything. The rain hammered against the windows of the Grandview Hotel like an angry fist, each drop carrying with it the weight of autumn's melancholy. The storm had been building all day across the Illinois countryside, dark clouds gathering like memories of forgotten dreams. Inside the dimly lit lobby, the grandfather clock in the corner struck 11, its deep chimes echoing through the nearly empty space with the solemnity of a church bell, marking the passage of another day into history. The hotel, once grand in its heyday during the 1960s, now bore the gentle wear of time like an elegant woman who had aged gracefully. Faded velvet curtains hung from tall windows that had witnessed decades of arrivals and departures, hellos and goodbyes. The Persian rugs, though worn thin in places by countless footsteps, still retained their intricate patterns and muted colors. Brass fixtures had lost some of their shine, but none of their dignity, speaking to an era when craftsmanship mattered more than efficiency. The marble floors gleamed under the warm glow of crystal chandeliers that had been dimmed for the late hour. Oil paintings of pastoral scenes decorated the walls. Rolling hills, babbling brooks, farmhouses nestled among oak trees, all depicting the kind of America that lived more in memory than reality. The air carried the faint scent of lemon oil and old wood, of fresh flowers and the lingering ghost of pipe tobacco from some long-departed guest. Peter Cetera pulled his collar up against the chill as he stepped through the revolving door, his guitar case in one hand and a small overnight bag in the other. The brass and glass door moved with the weight and substance of quality engineering, unlike the flimsy constructions of modern establishments. He paused for a moment in the threshold, letting his eyes adjust to the warm interior lighting after hours of driving through the storm-darkened countryside. He had left Chicago that morning with no particular destination in mind, seeking only solitude and the kind of peace that couldn't be found in recording studios or concert halls. The demands of fame had begun to weigh heavily on his soul like a coat that no longer fit properly. Interviews, photo shoots, contract negotiations, promotional appearances, all the machinery of success that had nothing to do with music itself. He needed this retreat, this chance to reconnect with the music that lived in his heart before it belonged to the world. The drive through rural Illinois had been therapeutic in itself. Rolling farmland stretched in every direction, interrupted by groves of maple and oak trees dressed in their autumn finest. Small towns appeared and disappeared like chapters in a book he was reading for the first time, each with its own grain elevator, its own main street lined with family businesses that had survived decades of economic upheaval through sheer stubbornness and community loyalty. As Peter approached the reception desk, he noticed a woman in her early 50s methodically cleaning the marble floor near the grand staircase. She moved with careful precision, her graying hair pulled back in a simple ponytail secured with what looked like a rubber band rather than anything decorative. Her uniform was clean and pressed but showed the signs of long wear. The fabric slightly faded, the edges of the collar beginning to fray. The kind of garment that spoke of pride maintained despite limited resources. There was something in her posture that caught his attention, a dignity that couldn't be diminished by circumstance, a grace that seemed to emanate from within rather than from external validation. She worked with the focused attention of someone who took pride in their craft, regardless of whether anyone was watching. Her movements had a rhythm to them, almost musical in their consistency and flow. Behind the ornate reception desk, a young night clerk looked up with tired eyes. He couldn't have been more than 25, with the pale complexion of someone who worked exclusively night shifts and the slightly rumpled appearance of a man who had been on duty for too many hours. His name tag read Henderson in neat block letters. "Good evening, sir. Checking in?" Henderson asked, his voice carrying the practiced politeness of the hospitality industry. "Yes, reservation under Cetera," Peter replied softly, not wanting to disturb the quiet sanctity of the late hour. There was something almost sacred about the hush that had settled over the lobby, broken only by the soft sounds of Rosa's careful work and the distant rumble of thunder outside. The clerk's eyes widened slightly with recognition, and Peter could see him making the connection between the name on the reservation and the face before him. To his credit, Henderson maintained his professionalism, though there was a slight quickening in his movements as he processed the check-in. "Of course, Mr. Cetra. We have your suite ready on the 3rd floor, overlooking the eastern hills. Will you be needing assistance with your luggage, sir?" "No, thank you. I travel light these days." Peter appreciated the young man's discretion. Too often, recognition brought unwanted attention, changed the dynamic of simple interactions, turned ordinary moments into performances. As Peter signed the registration book with an antique fountain pen that the hotel provided, another touch of old-world elegance, he couldn't help but notice that the cleaning woman had paused in her work. She was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. It wasn't the starstruck admiration he had grown accustomed to, but something deeper. Recognition mixed with something that looked almost like sadness, or perhaps longing. Her dark eyes held depths that spoke of experiences beyond the simple task at hand. There was intelligence there and sensitivity, qualities that suggested she was far more complex than her current circumstances might indicate. She seemed to be studying him not as a celebrity, but as a person, as if trying to understand something that went beyond fame or recognition. "Rosa!" the clerk called out, his tone carrying an edge of authority that seemed unnecessarily sharp for the gentlewoman who was clearly causing no disturbance. "You can finish that area tomorrow morning. We have a VIP guest, and I don't want any noise or distractions tonight." The woman, Rosa, nodded quietly and began gathering her cleaning supplies with efficient movements. "Of course, Mr. Henderson. I'll just finish this corner and be out of your way." Her voice carried a slight accent that Peter couldn't immediately place, but more noticeable was its musical quality. Even in those simple words, there was a melodic undertone that suggested she might be a natural singer. Peter watched the exchange with growing discomfort. There was something in Henderson's dismissive tone that grated against his Midwestern sensibilities, against the values his mother had instilled in him during his childhood in Chicago. Eleanor Cetra had raised her son to treat everyone with respect, regardless of their station in life. She had often said that a person's worth wasn't measured by their job title or bank account, but by their character and the kindness they showed to others. "Actually," Peter said, turning to face Henderson directly, his voice carrying a gentle but firm authority, "please don't change anything on my account. I appreciate people who take pride in their work, especially at this hour when most folks are home with their families." He looked directly at Rosa and offered her a warm, genuine smile. "Thank you for keeping this beautiful old place so well cared for. It's clear that you love what you do." Rosa's eyes met his for just a moment, and he saw something there, a flicker of surprise, perhaps even gratitude. It was the look of someone who wasn't accustomed to being truly seen, whose contributions usually went unnoticed or were taken for granted. "Thank you, sir. That's very kind of you to say." Her voice carried genuine appreciation, not the rote politeness of customer service, but the warmth of one human being acknowledging another's consideration. Peter took his key, an actual brass key attached to a heavy wooden fob rather than the plastic cards used by most modern hotels, and headed toward the elevator. But something made him pause at the threshold of the ornate lift. The way Rosa had looked at him, the musicality in her voice, the grace with which she moved despite being dismissed so curtly. It all reminded him of something, though he couldn't put his finger on what. The elevator was one of those old-fashioned affairs with brass gates that folded back like an accordion, ornate metalwork, and a small bench seat upholstered in burgundy velvet. The operator's chair sat empty. Budget constraints had long ago eliminated the need for such luxuries. But the control panel maintained the elegant brass switches and indicators of a bygone era. As it slowly carried him upward with the deliberate pace of another century, Peter found himself thinking about the woman downstairs. There had been something in her eyes, something that suggested depths beneath the surface that the world might never see. It reminded him of his early days in Chicago, when he would perform in small clubs and coffee houses, watching faces in the audience and seeing stories written in expressions, in the way people held themselves, in the silent communications that passed between hearts without ever being spoken aloud. His suite on the 3rd floor was comfortable without being ostentatious, exactly what he had hoped for when he'd made the reservation. The furniture was solid wood, probably crafted in the 1950s when such things were built to last generations. A writing desk sat beneath one of the tall windows, complete with brass lamp and leather blotter. The bed was covered with a handmade quilt that looked like it might have been created by local artisans, its pattern telling the story of the farming community that surrounded the hotel. The windows faced east, toward the rolling hills that surrounded the small town of Millbrook, Illinois. In the morning, he would see farmland and forests, the kind of landscape that had inspired some of his most heartfelt songs. But now, in the darkness punctuated by occasional flashes of lightning, he could see only his own reflection looking back at him from the rain-streaked glass. Peter set down his guitar case with the reverence of someone who understood that the instrument was more than just wood and strings. It was a vessel for emotion, a bridge between the internal world of feeling and the external world of expression. He moved to the window and looked down at the lobby below, visible through the tall windows that ran along the hotel's front facade. Rosa was still working despite the late hour and Henderson's obvious desire for her to finish and leave. She moved with a grace that seemed almost choreographed, as if she were dancing to music only she could hear. There was something hypnotic about watching her work, the way she put care into every motion, the way she treated even the most mundane tasks as if they mattered. Unable to shake his curiosity about this enigmatic woman, Peter made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He would venture back downstairs. Perhaps he was overthinking things. Perhaps his artistic sensibilities were reading too much into a chance encounter. But something about Rosa had touched him in a way he couldn't ignore. In his experience, such instincts were usually worth following. The lobby was even quieter when he returned, if such a thing were possible. Henderson had retreated to the back office, leaving Rosa alone with her work and her thoughts. The only sounds were the gentle swish of her mop against the marble, the distant rumble of thunder, and the soft ticking of the grandfather clock that seemed to mark not just minutes and hours, but the passage of dreams and possibilities. Rosa was humming softly as she polished the brass handrail of the grand staircase, a melody that made Peter stop in his tracks as if he had walked into an invisible wall. It was "Hard to Say I'm Sorry," one of his most popular songs, but not as he had recorded it. Rosa's version was slower, more contemplative, with subtle variations in melody and rhythm that transformed the familiar song into something entirely new and deeply personal. Her voice, though kept quiet out of consideration for sleeping guests, carried a richness and emotional depth that sent chills down his spine. It wasn't just technically proficient, though it clearly was, but it possessed that indefinable quality that separated true artists from mere performers. There was soul in every note, experience in every phrase, a lifetime of love and loss and hope woven into the familiar lyrics. Peter found himself holding his breath, afraid that any movement or sound might break the spell of the moment. This was what he had been searching for without realizing it. Authenticity in its purest form, music stripped of all pretense and commercial consideration, sung simply because the singer needed to sing, because the music demanded to be born into the world. "Excuse me," Peter said gently, stepping into the light and speaking just loud enough to be heard without startling her. Rosa looked up, her cheeks immediately flushing with embarrassment. Her hands steeled on the polishing cloth, and for a moment she looked like a child caught doing something forbidden. "Oh, Mr. Cetera, I'm so sorry. I didn't know anyone could hear me. I'll be quieter, I promise." "Please don't apologize," Peter said, moving closer with the careful movements of someone approaching a deer in the forest. "That was absolutely beautiful. Really, truly beautiful. Where did you learn to sing like that?" Rosa's hands fidgeted with the polishing cloth as she seemed to weigh whether to answer honestly or deflect with polite small talk. For a moment, Peter thought she might choose the safer path of dismissal, but then something in her expression shifted, as if she had made a decision to trust this stranger with a piece of her truth. I've always loved music. Your music, especially. It speaks to something deep inside." She touched her heart gently, unconsciously, as if indicating the place where music lived within her. "When I was younger, much younger, I thought I might, but that was a long time ago, in another life. Now I have other responsibilities. You have an incredible voice, Peter said, with the sincerity of someone who had heard thousands of singers and knew real talent when he encountered it. Natural pitch, beautiful tone, and more importantly, you understand the emotion behind the words. Have you ever performed professionally? A shadow crossed Rosa's face like a cloud passing over the sun, and she looked down at her hands. The question had touched something painful, some buried dream or abandoned hope. That was a long time ago, in another life entirely. Now I have other responsibilities, more important things to focus on. Peter sensed there was a story there, one that might be painful to tell. But before he could find a gentle way to pursue the subject, Henderson emerged from the back office, his expression clearly displeased at finding his VIP guest engaged in conversation with the cleaning staff. "Rosa, I thought I asked you to finish up and leave our guest in peace," Henderson said curtly, his tone carrying the kind of class-conscious disapproval that made Peter's jaw tighten with suppressed anger. "She wasn't disturbing me at all," Peter interjected firmly, allowing a hint of steel to enter his voice. "Actually, I came down because I couldn't sleep, and I was hoping to find someone to talk with." Rosa was being very gracious with her time. Henderson's demeanor shifted immediately in the presence of his VIP guest, his disapproval morphing into obsequious concern. "Of course, Mr. Cetra. Rosa, if Mr. Cetra needs anything at all, please make sure he's taken care of. Customer service is our top priority." The hypocrisy of the statement, treating Rosa as invisible one moment and expecting her to provide excellent service the next, wasn't lost on Peter. After Henderson retreated to his office again, Peter turned back to Rosa with an expression of gentle conspiracy. "Would you mind sitting with me for a few minutes? I promise I won't keep you from your work too long, but I'd really like to hear more of your story." He gestured toward the two worn leather chairs near the fireplace, where the dying embers still cast a warm glow that made the entire corner of the lobby feel like a private sanctuary. Rosa glanced around nervously, clearly torn between her desire to continue their conversation and her awareness of workplace boundaries. But something in Peter's manner, perhaps the genuine interest in his eyes, or the way he had defended her to Henderson, convinced her to take the risk. They settled into the leather chairs, which bore the comfortable patina of decades of use. The chairs were positioned at an angle that encouraged intimate conversation, and Peter could see that Rosa was gradually relaxing, despite her initial nervousness. "Tell me about yourself," Peter said gently, his voice carrying the kind of warmth that invited confidence. "How long have you worked here at the Grandview?" 3 years now," Rosa replied, her hands folded in her lap in a gesture that spoke of careful upbringing and natural dignity. "Since my husband died, I needed work, and Mr. Patterson, the owner, gave me a chance when no one else would. I'm grateful for that, even if..." She trailed off, seeming to think better of whatever complaint she had been about to voice. "I'm sorry for your loss," Peter said softly, meaning every word. He had learned over the years that grief was a universal language, one that required no elaboration to be understood. Rosa nodded, her eyes growing distant as if she were seeing across years rather than across the lobby. Miguel was a good man. 22 years he worked at the steel mill, getting up before dawn, coming home after dark, never complaining about the heat or the noise or the way the work wore down his body bit by bit. The doctors said it was from all the dust and chemicals, all those years of breathing in things that weren't meant for human lungs. He fought the sickness for 2 years before. Her voice trailed off, but Peter could fill in the rest of the story from the pain in her eyes. He waited patiently, understanding that some stories needed to be told in their own time, at their own pace. "We had dreams once," Rosa said finally, her voice carrying the weight of memories that were both precious and painful. "Miguel and I met in Mexico City, where we were both trying to make it as musicians. He played guitar, classical guitar, beautiful finger-picking that sounded like water running over stones, and I sang. We thought we had something special, maybe something that could take us places." Peter leaned forward slightly, drawn into the story despite himself. "What kind of music did you perform?" "Traditional Mexican songs, some contemporary pieces, a few things we wrote together. Miguel had a gift for melody, and I could write lyrics in both Spanish and English. We thought we might make it big, Maybe even come to America and record albums, tour, live the life we saw in magazines and heard about on the radio. She smiled sadly, the expression of someone looking back at their younger self with a mixture of affection and regret. What happened to those dreams? Life happened, reality happened. We came to America, but instead of recording studios, we found factories and night shifts and the endless struggle to survive in a country that didn't particularly want us. Miguel's beautiful guitar playing became a weekend hobby, something he did on Sunday afternoons when he wasn't too tired from the mill. And my singing? Well, that was reserved for lullabies to our children and hymns at church. You have children? Rosa's entire demeanor changed when she spoke of her daughters, her face lighting up with pride and love. 2 daughters. Maria is 22 now, finishing her nursing degree at the State University. She's always been the scholarly one, getting perfect grades, winning scholarships, determined to help people heal. And Carmen is 19, studying to be a teacher. She has Miguel's gentle spirit and his way with people. Both of them are everything their father and I dreamed they could be. Do they know about your musical background? They know I sing around the house, that their father played guitar, but they don't know about the dreams we had, about the clubs where we performed, about the demo recordings we made that are probably still sitting in some producer's file cabinet gathering dust. They don't know that we once thought we might be somebody important. Why don't you tell them? Rosa considered the question seriously before answering. Because dreams are luxuries, mister. Etc. When you're raising children on factory wages, when you're worried about paying rent and buying groceries and keeping everyone healthy, dreams become dangerous. They make you dissatisfied with what you have. And what I had was precious. My family, Miguel's love, the chance to give my girls opportunities I never had. But the music is still there, Peter observed, hearing it in her voice even as she spoke about practical matters. I can hear it in the way you talk, see it in the way you move. Music doesn't just disappear because life gets complicated. Rosa looked up at him with surprise, as if no one had ever made such an observation before. You really notice such things? Music recognizes music, Peter said simply. It's like a language that some people speak fluently, even when they think no one is listening. What you were doing with my song earlier, those variations, that emotional interpretation, that doesn't come from casual listening. That comes from deep understanding, from someone who thinks musically. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. The only sounds the ticking of the grandfather clock and the distant rumble of thunder that suggested the storm was beginning to move away. Peter found himself thinking about his own journey, the choices he had made, the paths he had taken and abandoned. Fame had brought him many gifts, but it had also cost him things: simplicity, privacy, the ability to connect with people without the barrier of celebrity. Rosa, he said finally, would you sing something for me? Not one of my songs, something that's yours, something that comes from your heart. Rosa shook her head immediately, her hands fluttering nervously. Oh no, I couldn't possibly. It's been so long since I performed for anyone, and my voice isn't what it used to be. Age and, well, voices change when you don't use them properly. I think you might be surprised, Peter said gently. Sometimes the most beautiful voices are the ones that carry the weight of experience, that have been shaped by life rather than just by training. There's a depth that can only come from having lived, from having loved and lost, and found reasons to keep singing anyway. Rosa looked at him for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether she could trust this famous stranger with something so personal, so vulnerable. Peter could see the internal struggle playing out across her features, the desire to share her gift warring with years of self-doubt and practical caution. Finally, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath, as if preparing to dive into deep water. When she began to sing, Peter felt as if the world around them had suddenly become more vivid, more real. The song was in Spanish, a traditional ballad that spoke of love found and lost, of journeys taken across great distances in search of something that might only exist in memory. Her voice rose and fell with a natural rhythm of storytelling, each note carrying emotional weight that needed no translation. The melody was haunting, ancient, the kind of song that had been passed down through generations of women who had known both joy and sorrow. Peter found himself transported, not just by the technical beauty of her voice, though it was remarkable, but by the raw honesty of her performance. This wasn't singing as entertainment or even as art. This was singing as prayer, as testimony, as the most fundamental human need to express what words alone couldn't convey. When she finished, the silence that followed was profound. Peter realized he had been holding his breath, afraid to break the spell of the moment with something as mundane as breathing. "Rosa," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. That was absolutely extraordinary. Tears had gathered in the corners of her eyes, reflecting the dying firelight like tiny stars. "I haven't sung that song since Miguel's funeral. It was his favorite, something his grandmother taught him when he was a boy in Guadalajara. He always said it reminded him that love doesn't end with death, that the important things continue in ways we might not understand but can still feel. He would have been so proud to hear you sing it just now," Peter said, meaning every word. Rosa wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture so simple and human that it made Peter's heart ache with recognition. "I should really get back to work now. Mr. Henderson will be checking on me soon, and if he finds me sitting here talking instead of cleaning—" "Wait," Peter said, his mind suddenly racing with possibilities. "I have an idea. What if I told you there might be a way to honor Miguel's memory and your music at the same time?" Rosa looked at him skeptically, the expression of someone who had learned not to trust in easy solutions or sudden opportunities. "What do you mean?" Peter stood and began pacing, his movements reflecting the excitement of an idea taking shape. "I'm performing at the Chicago Theater next week. It's a special concert, acoustic only, very intimate, about 800 people. What if you came and sang with me?" Rosa's eyes widened in shock, and for a moment she looked as if he had suggested she sprout wings and fly to the moon. "Oh no, I couldn't possibly. I'm nobody special. Your fans wouldn't want to hear someone like me." "You're absolutely wrong about that," Peter said firmly, his voice carrying the conviction of someone who had spent decades reading audiences, understanding what moved people. "Music isn't about fame or status or having the right connections. It's about truth, about connecting with people's hearts in ways that matter. What you just did, that was pure truth. But I don't have stage clothes or professional experience or—" Rosa began listing objections, each one a barrier she had constructed against disappointment. "Rosa, listen to me." Peter sat back down and took her hands gently, his touch warm and reassuring. Some of the most powerful moments in music happen when someone shares their authentic self with the world. You have something that can't be taught in any music school or manufactured in any recording studio. You have soul. You have the ability to make people feel, to remind them of what's important, to touch something deep inside that they might have forgotten was there. Rosa stared at him as if he were speaking a foreign language, her mind clearly struggling to process what he was suggesting. "Even if I wanted to, I have responsibilities here. I can't just abandon my job to chase after fantasies. I have bills to pay, daughters to support. What if it wasn't a fantasy? What if it was an opportunity to show your daughters that dreams don't have to die, that they sometimes just wait for the right moment to bloom again?" Peter's voice carried gentle passion, the conviction of someone who understood both the power of music and the weight of practical concerns. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge, like an invitation to step beyond the boundaries of safe, predictable existence. Peter could see Rosa wrestling with herself, torn between the practical concerns that had governed her life for so long and the spark of possibility that his offer had ignited. "I need time to think," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course you do. But Rosa, promise me something. Promise you'll at least consider it seriously. Not for me, not for some abstract idea of success or recognition, but for Miguel, for the dreams you shared together, for the music that's still alive inside you." Rosa nodded slowly, tears beginning to flow again. "I promise I'll think about it. Really think about it." Peter reached into his wallet and pulled out one of his business cards, writing his personal cell phone number on the back in his careful handwriting. "Call me when you've decided, whatever you choose. And Rosa, I want you to know that meeting you tonight has reminded me why I fell in love with music in the first place. Thank you for that gift." The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having washed the world clean during the night. Peter checked out of the hotel with a heart both heavy and hopeful. Rosa had already finished her shift and gone home, but she had left something at the front desk, a small envelope with his name written on it in careful script. Inside was a handwritten note on hotel stationery. "Dear Mr. Cetra, thank you for seeing me when I had forgotten how to see myself. Whatever I decide about your generous offer, last night gave me something I thought I had lost forever. The memory of who I used to be and the possibility of who I might still become. With gratitude, Rosa Martinez." Peter drove back to Chicago through the morning sunshine with Rosa's voice echoing in his mind and her words echoing in his heart. He couldn't shake the feeling that their encounter had been more than coincidence, that perhaps he had needed to meet her as much as she had needed to be heard. The familiar skyline of Chicago rose before him as he navigated the morning traffic, but somehow the city looked different today. The buildings seemed less imposing, the pace less frantic. Rosa's story had reminded him that behind every window, behind every face in the crowd, there were dreams and stories and possibilities that the world might never see unless someone took the time to look, really look. 3 days passed without word from Rosa. Peter found himself checking his phone constantly, wondering if he had overstepped boundaries, if his offer had seemed patronizing rather than genuine. He began to question whether he had misread the situation entirely, whether his artistic sensibilities had led him to see potential where none existed. On Thursday evening, as he sat in his Chicago apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, watching the sun set over the water in a blaze of orange and gold, his phone finally rang. The caller ID showed a number with an Illinois area code he didn't recognize. "Mr. Cetra, this is Rosa Martinez from the Grandview Hotel." "Rosa!" Peter's heart leapt with relief and excitement. "I'm so glad you called. I was beginning to worry that I had offended you somehow, or that my offer had seemed presumptuous." "No, not at all. You were nothing but kind and respectful. I've been thinking about what you said and, well, I talked to my daughters." Peter held his breath, afraid to hope too much. "I told them about their fathers and my dreams, about the music we used to make together, about the clubs where we performed and the songs we wrote. And you know what they said? What did they say? They said they always wondered where their love of music came from. Maria has been writing songs since she was 14. Beautiful, heartbreaking songs about healing and hope. And Carmen plays guitar, Miguel's old guitar that I thought no one was interested in. They said they thought I had given up too much for them, sacrificed too many pieces of myself, and that maybe it was time I gave something back to myself." Peter felt tears prick his eyes. "So what have you decided?" There was a long pause before Rosa spoke again, and when she did, her voice carried a strength and determination he hadn't heard before. "I would like to accept your offer, if it's still available, but I have conditions. Name them, whatever you need. I want my daughters to be there in the audience. They've never seen their mother perform, never really understood who their parents were before they became just parents. I want them to understand where they come from, what dreams look like when they're given a chance to live." "Done," Peter said without hesitation. "And I want to sing Miguel's favorite song, the one I sang for you that night. In Spanish first, the way he wrote it, and then in English so everyone can understand the words. It's called Corazón de Oro, Heart of Gold. It's about how love creates something precious and permanent, something that can't be destroyed by circumstances or time. That sounds perfect, absolutely perfect. And one more thing," Rosa continued, her voice growing softer. "I want to donate any payment to the music program at Carmen's school. They've had their budget cut and the children don't have instruments or sheet music. If this is really happening, if I'm really going to stand on a stage and sing, I want it to mean something beyond just me." Peter closed his eyes, overwhelmed by Rosa's generosity of spirit. "Rosa, you've just made me happier than I've been in months, and prouder too. We're going to make this something special, something that honors Miguel's memory and gives your daughters a gift they'll treasure forever." The week that followed was a whirlwind of preparation that felt like a dream Rosa was afraid to wake up from. Peter arranged for her to meet with his vocal coach, not to change her voice or her natural style, but to help her feel more confident about performing in a large venue. The coach, a motherly woman named Margaret who had worked with some of the biggest names in music, was enchanted by Rosa's natural ability and emotional authenticity. "Honey," Margaret said after hearing Rosa sing just once, "I've been doing this for 30 years, and I can count on one hand the number of people who have what you have. Don't you dare let anyone try to change that voice or that heart. All you need is confidence in what you already possess." Peter also worked with his arranger to create a simple, elegant arrangement for Corazón de Oro. They decided to keep the instrumentation minimal, just Peter's acoustic guitar, a violin, and a cello, instruments that would support Rosa's voice without overwhelming it. The goal was to create a setting that would showcase the song's emotional power, rather than impress with technical complexity. Rosa's daughters, Maria and Carmen, drove to Chicago to be with their mother, and to witness what they were already calling Mama's Miracle. Peter met them the day before the concert at his favorite restaurant, a small Italian place on the north side that served the kind of food that reminded him of his childhood. Maria was a striking young woman, with her mother's dark eyes and an air of quiet intelligence that spoke of someone who had learned early to observe and understand the world around her. Carmen was more animated, with an infectious smile and the kind of energy that made everyone around her feel happier just by proximity. "Mr. Cetera," Maria said, shaking his hand with the firm grip of someone who understood the value of making a good impression. "I want to thank you for giving our mother this opportunity. She's been different this week. Lighter somehow, like she's remembered how to dream." Carmen nodded enthusiastically. "She's been singing constantly, in the shower, while she's cooking, even humming while she's working at the hotel. It's like she's been carrying all this music inside her, and you gave her permission to let it out. Your mother is an extraordinary woman with an extraordinary gift," Peter replied. "I'm honored that she's willing to share it with my audience. But I have to ask, are you nervous about tomorrow night?" "Terrified," Maria admitted with a laugh, "but also excited. We've never seen Mama perform, never really understood what she and Papa had together before we came along, and life got complicated. We found some old photographs," Carmen added, pulling out her phone to show Peter pictures she had taken of family snapshots. "Look at this one." The photo showed a much younger Rosa and Miguel on what appeared to be a small stage. Rosa in a simple white dress with flowers in her hair, Miguel in a dark suit with his classical guitar. They were looking at each other as they performed, their faces radiant with love and shared purpose. The image captured not just two musicians, but two people completely in sync, creating something beautiful together. "They look so happy," Peter observed. "They were," Maria said softly. "Even after they stopped performing, even when Papa was sick, they had something special. Mama is doing this as much for him as for herself." The night of the concert arrived with the crisp clarity that only comes with October evenings in Chicago. The Chicago Theater, with its iconic marquee blazing against the evening sky, stood as a monument to the golden age of American entertainment. The vertical sign reached toward the stars like a beacon, drawing people from across the city to witness something they sensed would be special, even if they didn't know exactly what to expect. Inside the historic venue, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. The Chicago Theater had hosted legends, everyone from Frank Sinatra to Ella Fitzgerald, from Bob Dylan to Aretha Franklin. The walls themselves seemed to vibrate with the memory of all the great performances that had graced its stage. Tonight, those walls would witness something new, something that would join the pantheon of unforgettable moments in the theater's storied history. Peter had decided not to announce Rosa's appearance in advance, wanting it to be a surprise for both the audience and for Rosa herself. He wanted her to experience the pure joy of sharing her gift without the pressure of expectations or advance publicity. The concert had sold out based on his reputation alone, but he knew that by the end of the evening, the audience would be talking about someone they had never heard of before tonight. Backstage, Rosa was a study in controlled nerves and quiet determination. She wore a simple black dress that Peter had insisted on buying for her, elegant but understated, allowing her natural beauty and dignity to shine through without distraction. Her daughters had helped her with her hair and makeup, creating a look that was polished but authentically her own. Maria and Carmen sat in the wings, holding hands and whispering encouragements to their mother. They had never seen her in this context before, as an artist preparing to share her gift with the world. The transformation was remarkable. Rosa still looked like their mother, but there was something else there now, a confidence and purpose that reminded them of the woman in those old photographs with their father. "Mama," Carmen said, squeezing her mother's hand, "Papa would be so proud of you right now. Can you feel him with us?" Rosa nodded, tears threatening to ruin her carefully applied makeup. "He's here. I can feel him in the music, in the love you girls are showing me, in the kindness of Mr. Cetra." Miguel always believed that music was bigger than any one person, that it belonged to everyone who needed it. Tonight feels like proof that he was right. Peter appeared beside them, looking relaxed and confident in the way that comes from decades of performing. But there was something different about his demeanor tonight, an excitement that went beyond the usual pre-show energy. He was about to share something special with his audience, something that would remind them all why they fell in love with music in the first place. "How are you feeling, Rosa?" he asked gently. "Scared, grateful, more alive than I've felt in years," she replied honestly. "Is it normal to feel all of those things at once?" Peter laughed warmly. "If you weren't feeling all of those things, I'd be worried. The best performances come from that place where fear and excitement meet, where your heart is completely open and vulnerable. That's where the magic happens." The theater was filled to capacity. 800 seats occupied by people who had come expecting to hear familiar songs delivered with professional competence. What they were about to receive was something far more precious. A reminder that music is not entertainment, but communion. Not performance, but revelation. Peter opened the concert with several of his classic songs, each one delivered with the kind of intimacy that only acoustic arrangements can provide. His voice, weathered by years of touring but still strong and emotionally resonant, filled the theater with warmth and familiarity. The audience settled into the comfortable rhythm of a Peter Cetera concert, singing along to songs they had loved for decades. But as the evening progressed, Peter began to weave a different kind of narrative. Between songs, he talked about music as a universal language, about the ways that melody and rhythm could connect strangers across vast distances of culture and experience. He spoke about authenticity in an age of artificial enhancement, about the difference between performing and sharing, about the voices that often go unheard simply because they exist outside the machinery of commercial success. "Music," he told the audience as he tuned his guitar between songs, "has always been a democratic art form. It doesn't belong to record companies or radio stations or concert promoters. It belongs to anyone who has something to say and the courage to say it through song. Sometimes the most powerful music comes from the most unexpected places, sung by people whose stories we might never hear if we don't take the time to listen." As he reached the midpoint of the show, Peter set down his guitar and moved to the front of the stage, his expression growing more serious and heartfelt. The audience sensed that something significant was about to happen, and a hush fell over the theater like a blanket of anticipation. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying the gravity of someone about to make an important introduction. "Music has always been about connection, between the artist and the audience, between the heart and the world, between what we feel inside and what we're brave enough to share with others. Sometimes, if we're very fortunate, we meet someone whose music reminds us why we fell in love with this art form in the first place." The silence in the theater was complete now, broken only by the soft sounds of people shifting in their seats, leaning forward with curiosity and anticipation. "A week ago," Peter continued, "I met a woman who showed me that the most powerful music comes not from fame or fortune, but from a life fully lived, from love shared and lost and remembered. I'd like you to meet someone very special, someone who represents everything that's beautiful and authentic about the musical spirit. Please welcome Rosa Martinez." Rosa walked onto the stage with quiet grace, her nervousness evident but not overwhelming. The audience welcomed her with warm applause, sensing something genuine and unscripted about to unfold. The theater's sophisticated lighting system bathed her in a warm glow that emphasized her natural dignity and the strength in her bearing. Peter joined her at center stage, his presence offering support and encouragement without overshadowing her moment. "Rosa," he said gently, his voice carrying clearly through the theater's excellent acoustics. "Would you like to tell the audience about the song you're going to sing?" Rosa took the microphone with hands that trembled slightly, but held it with growing confidence. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the theater, reaching every seat with the kind of clarity that comes from speaking absolute truth. This song was written by my late husband, Miguel Martinez. He wrote it for me when we were young and thought we could conquer the world with nothing but love and music. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke, drawing strength from the memory she was honoring. "We never did conquer the world, but we built something better, a family, a life filled with small moments of beauty and joy." This song is called Corazón de Oro, Heart of Gold. It's about how love creates something precious and permanent, something that survives even when the people who created it are gone. The orchestra, consisting of Peter on acoustic guitar, a violinist, and a cellist, took their positions. The arrangement was simple and elegant, designed to support Rosa's voice without overwhelming it. As the first gentle notes filled the theater, a profound silence settled over the audience. This was clearly not going to be entertainment in the traditional sense. This was going to be something deeper, more personal, more transformative. What happened next would be remembered by everyone present for the rest of their lives. Rosa began to sing, first in Spanish, her voice rising with confidence as she found her rhythm. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, a traditional structure that spoke of generations of storytelling through song. Her pronunciation was perfect, her phrasing natural and emotionally authentic. The Spanish verses told the story of a love that began in youth and grew stronger through trials and hardship. Even those in the audience who didn't speak Spanish could understand the emotional arc of the song through Rosa's delivery. The joy of new love, the strength found in commitment, the sorrow of loss, and the enduring nature of true connection. When she transitioned to English for the second verse, translating Miguel's words for the entire audience, the theater fell into an even deeper silence. Her voice carried every word with the weight of lived experience, of promises made and kept, of dreams shared and transformed but never abandoned. "In your eyes I see tomorrow, in your smile I find my way. Though the years may bring us sorrow, love remains our golden ray. Heart of gold, beat forever in this world of joy and pain. Heart of gold, leave me never, till we meet in love again." The words were simple, but Rosa's delivery invested them with profound meaning. This wasn't just a song about romantic love. It was about the love that sustains us through difficulty, the love that transforms ordinary moments into something sacred, the love that continues even when death separates us from those we hold most dear. Peter joined her for the final chorus, their voices blending in harmony that seemed to have been crafted by angels. But even as he sang with her, it was clear that this was Rosa's moment, her gift to the world, her tribute to a love that had shaped her life in ways both seen and unseen. When the last note faded into silence, the theater remained hushed for what felt like an eternity. 800 people sat in complete stillness, absorbing what they had just experienced. This hadn't been a performance in any conventional sense. It had been a sharing of something sacred, a glimpse into the kind of love that most people only dream of finding. Then, slowly, someone in the front row began to clap. The applause built gradually, becoming a standing ovation that seemed to rise from the very foundations of the building. People weren't just clapping. They were crying, shouting, "Brava!" demanding more. But Rosa had said what she came to say, shared what she needed to share. She looked out at the audience with tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by their response but clearly understanding that this moment was about something larger than personal recognition. This was about Miguel, about their shared dreams, about the music that lives in every human heart, waiting for the right moment to be born. Rosa hugged Peter, whispered, "Thank you for everything," in his ear, and walked off stage into the arms of her daughters, who were crying and laughing and holding her, as if they never wanted to let her go. Peter finished the concert, but everyone in the theater knew they had witnessed something extraordinary, something that would be talked about and remembered long after the more conventional songs had faded from memory. The encore felt almost anticlimactic after Rosa's moment of pure truth and vulnerability. Later, in the quiet of the theater's green room, Peter found Rosa sitting with Maria and Carmen, all three women surrounded by flowers and cards from audience members who had been moved to express their gratitude for what they had witnessed. "Rosa," Peter said, settling into a chair beside them, "how do you feel?" Rosa looked up at him with eyes that seemed to glow with an inner light. "I feel like Miguel was with me up there, like he was singing through me, like all those dreams we shared didn't die with him, but just transformed into something different, something that could touch other people's hearts." "Mom," Carmen said, her voice thick with emotion, "we're so proud of you. Not just for tonight, but for everything you've sacrificed and given and taught us over the years. Tonight we finally understood who our parents really were before they became just parents." Maria nodded enthusiastically. "You showed us that dreams don't die when life gets complicated. They just wait underground like seeds. And when the right conditions come along, they can still grow into something beautiful." Peter sat quietly, feeling privileged to witness this moment of family recognition and healing. "Rosa, I hope you know that what happened tonight changed everyone who was here. You gave them something they'll carry with them always. A reminder that authentic emotion is more powerful than any technical perfection, that love is the source of the most beautiful music. And you gave me something I thought I'd lost forever?" Rosa replied, reaching over to squeeze his hand. "You gave me back a piece of myself, a piece of Miguel, a piece of the dreams we shared when we were young and foolish enough to believe that love and music could change the world." In the weeks and months that followed, Rosa's performance became the stuff of legend among Peter's fans and beyond. Bootleg recordings circulated online, and music blogs began writing about the mysterious woman who had moved an entire theater to tears with a single song. Music industry professionals reached out, wanting to know more about this unknown singer who had demonstrated such remarkable emotional authenticity. But Rosa had no interest in parlaying her moment of recognition into a traditional music career. She had said what she needed to say, honored Miguel's memory in the way that felt right to her, and shown her daughters that their parents' dreams had meaning and value beyond practical success. She returned to Millbrook and her job at the Grandview Hotel, but something fundamental had changed. She sang openly now while she worked, her voice filling the lobby with melodies that drew guests and staff alike to pause and listen. The hotel began marketing itself as a place where unexpected beauty could be found, where the staff treated guests like family, and where music was always in the air. Word spread about the singing cleaning lady who could move people to tears with traditional songs delivered with perfect authenticity. Travel writers began including the Grandview Hotel in their articles about hidden gems and authentic American experiences. Reservations increased, not because of luxury amenities or prestigious locations, but because people wanted to experience something real in an increasingly artificial world. Mr. Patterson, the hotel owner, recognized the unique gift Rosa brought to his establishment. Rather than exploit her newfound fame, he created a small performance space in the lobby where she could sing for guests who requested it, but always on her terms, always as a gift freely given rather than a service demanded. Rosa established boundaries that honored both her responsibilities and her art. She would sing one song per evening for interested guests, always something meaningful, always delivered with the same authenticity that had moved the Chicago theater audience. But she remained first and foremost a member of the hotel staff, someone who took pride in creating a welcoming environment for travelers seeking comfort and rest. The money she would have earned from the Chicago performance, Peter had insisted on paying her despite her protests, went directly to the music program at Carmen's elementary school, just as she had planned. The donation purchased new instruments, sheet music, and provided funding for a guest artist program that brought professional musicians to work with the children. 6 months after that magical night in Chicago, Peter attended Maria's graduation from nursing school. The ceremony was held on a beautiful spring day at the State University, with families gathering to celebrate their children's achievements and the promise of careers dedicated to healing and service. In her graduation speech as class valedictorian, Maria spoke about the importance of caring for others while never forgetting to care for the dreams that make us who we are. She talked about her mother's courage in stepping onto a stage after decades away from music, and how that act of bravery had reminded her entire family that it's never too late to honor the parts of ourselves that make life meaningful. "My mother taught me that dreams don't have expiration dates," Maria said to the assembled crowd. "They don't become invalid when life gets complicated or when responsibilities take precedence. They wait patiently inside us until we're ready to give them life again, often in ways we never expected." Carmen had become a beloved music teacher at the local elementary school, incorporating traditional Mexican songs into her curriculum and teaching her students that music is a bridge between cultures, generations, and hearts. She used her grandmother's old guitar, the one Miguel had brought from Mexico, to accompany the children's voices, creating a living connection between past and present. Under Carmen's guidance, the school's children's choir began performing at community events, their young voices carrying forward the musical traditions that Rosa and Miguel had brought from Mexico decades earlier. The choir became known throughout the region for their emotional authenticity and their ability to move audiences with simple, heartfelt performances. And Rosa? She continued working at the Grandview Hotel, but her role had evolved beyond simple housekeeping. She had become the heart of the establishment, the person guests remembered long after they had checked out and returned to their regular lives. Her presence transformed the hotel from a mere business transaction into a human experience, a reminder that hospitality is ultimately about caring for others in their moments of transition and vulnerability. One evening, nearly a year after that transformative night in Chicago, Peter found himself driving past Millbrook on his way to a concert in Springfield, Illinois. The familiar countryside rolled past his windows, farmland and forest, small towns and grain elevators, the landscape that had shaped his musical sensibilities and continued to feed his soul. On impulse, he exited the highway and drove the few extra miles to the Grandview Hotel. As he pulled into the familiar parking lot, he could see through the tall windows that Rosa was working in the lobby, arranging fresh flowers at the front desk, while humming softly to herself. When she saw Peter enter through the revolving door, her face lit up with a kind of joy that can't be manufactured or performed. It was the genuine happiness of one friend seeing another after too long an absence. "Mr. Cetera, what a wonderful surprise," Rosa exclaimed, coming around the desk to give him a warm hug. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by to see how you're doing," Peter said, returning her embrace and marveling at how much more confident and radiant she seemed. "I'm doing very well," Rosa replied, her voice carrying a contentment that spoke of someone who had found peace with her choices. "Maria is working at Chicago General Hospital now, and absolutely loves every moment of it. She says nursing is like music. You have to listen carefully, respond with sensitivity, and always remember that you're dealing with something precious and fragile." And Carmen? Teaching second grade here in town and loving every minute of it. She started a children's choir that performs at community events, and you should see how the children light up when they sing. She's teaching them that music isn't about being perfect, but about sharing joy and connecting with each other. They settled into the same chairs by the fireplace where they had first shared Rosa's story, and Peter marveled at the transformation he saw in her. She seemed to glow from within, carrying herself with a confidence and peace that hadn't been there during their first encounter. "Do you ever think about that night in Chicago?" Peter asked. Rosa smiled, her expression thoughtful and serene. "Every single day. But not because of the applause or the recognition, though that was overwhelming and beautiful. I think about it because it taught me that honoring the past doesn't mean being trapped by it, and that sharing our gifts with others doesn't diminish us but makes us more complete. You've inspired me more than you know," Peter told her sincerely. "That night reminded me why I became a musician in the first place. It wasn't for chart positions or sold-out stadiums, but for moments like that, when music becomes a bridge between souls, when authenticity touches something deep in people's hearts. As their conversation continued, other guests in the lobby began to gather around, drawn by the sound of familiar voices and the warmth of genuine friendship being renewed. Rosa introduced Peter to several regular guests who had become like extended family, and he was struck by the community she had created simply by being herself, by treating everyone with dignity and kindness. "Rosa?" asked an elderly gentleman who had been staying at the hotel monthly for business. "Would you sing something for us this evening? Mr. Cetera is here, and it feels like a special occasion." Rosa looked at Peter questioningly, and he nodded encouragingly. "Only if you want to," he said. "But I'd love to hear that voice again." Rosa considered for a moment, then smiled. "I think I know just the song." She moved to the small piano in the corner of the lobby, an addition Mr. Patterson had made after her Chicago performance, and began to play a simple melody. The song she chose was "Bridge Over Troubled Water," but her interpretation was uniquely her own. She sang it as a prayer, as a promise, as a reminder that we are all called to be sources of comfort and strength for each other in times of difficulty. Her voice filled the lobby with warmth and hope, transforming the commercial space into something that felt almost sacred. When she finished, the small audience of hotel guests and staff members applauded appreciatively, but the response was different from that night in Chicago. This applause was intimate, personal, the response of people who felt they had been given a gift by someone they cared about rather than entertained by a performer they didn't know. As the evening wound down and the other guests drifted away to their rooms or their homes, Peter found himself alone with Rosa again, just as they had been that first night when everything changed. "Rosa," he said, "I want you to know that you've taught me something important about success and fulfillment. You could have used that night in Chicago as a launching pad for a different kind of life. But you chose to stay here, to keep doing work that some people might consider ordinary. Why?" Rosa thought carefully before answering, her response carrying the weight of deep consideration and self-knowledge. "Because I realized that night that I wasn't looking for a career in music. I was looking for a way to honor Miguel's memory and to show my daughters that the dreams we carry inside us have value, even if they don't lead to fame or fortune." She paused, gazing out the tall windows at the quiet street beyond. "This work isn't ordinary to me, Peter. Taking care of people, creating a space where they feel welcomed and valued, using music to bring a little beauty into everyday moments. This feels like exactly what I'm supposed to be doing." "And the music?" "The music is everywhere now," Rosa said with a smile. "It's in how I approach my work, in how I interact with guests, in how I raise my daughters, in how I choose to live each day. That night in Chicago taught me that music isn't something we do, it's something we are." As Peter prepared to leave, Rosa walked him to the door, just as she had done a year earlier. But this time, the goodbye felt different. Not like an ending, but like a continuation of a friendship that would endure regardless of distance or time. "Will I see you again?" Rosa asked. "Count on it," Peter replied with a warm smile. "And Rosa, keep singing. The world needs voices like yours, authentic, generous, unafraid to share beauty simply because it exists." Peter drove away from Millbrook with a full heart, understanding more clearly than ever that the most important music often happens in the spaces between performances, in the daily choices we make about how to treat others and how to live our lives. He had learned from Rosa that true artistry isn't measured by external recognition, but by the willingness to bring beauty and authenticity to whatever circumstances we find ourselves in. The story of that transformative night became part of Peter's standard repertoire, not as a song, but as a reminder to his audiences about the music that lives in unexpected places. He often told the story during concerts, especially in smaller venues where the intimacy allowed for deeper connection with his audience. "I want to tell you about a woman named Rosa Martinez," he would say, and the venues would grow quiet as people sensed they were about to hear something important. "She taught me that the most beautiful songs are sometimes sung by people who think no one is listening, and that the most powerful performances happen when we share our authentic selves without reservation." The story would resonate differently with each audience, but the response was consistently powerful. People would approach Peter after concerts to share their own stories of hidden dreams, of talents they had set aside for practical reasons, of moments when they had been seen and valued by unexpected strangers. Music bloggers and journalists began writing about the Rosa Martinez effect, the phenomenon of audiences leaving Peter Cetera concerts with a renewed sense of their own creative possibilities. Concertgoers reported feeling inspired to reconnect with abandoned hobbies, to sing in church choirs, to dust off old instruments, to pay attention to the music that surrounded them in daily life. And in Millbrook, Illinois, Rosa continued to sing as she worked, her voice carrying through the halls of the old hotel like a gentle benediction. The Grandview had become known as a place where something magical could happen at any moment, where the boundary between ordinary life and extraordinary experience was thin and permeable. Travelers from around the world began making pilgrimages to the small Illinois town, drawn by stories of the singing cleaning lady who had touched hearts at the Chicago theater. They came expecting to be entertained, but they left having experienced something deeper, a reminder that beauty and authenticity could flourish anywhere, that every person carried within them the potential for grace and transcendence. Rosa received these visitors with the same warmth and dignity she had always shown, neither diminished by their attention nor inflated by their praise. She understood that what had happened that night in Chicago belonged not just to her, but to everyone who needed to believe that their dreams mattered, that their voices deserved to be heard, that it was never too late to honor the music that lived within their hearts. The grandfather clock in the Grandview's lobby continued to mark the hours, but time itself seemed to move differently in Rosa's presence. Moments expanded to hold more meaning. Conversations deepened beyond small talk, and guests found themselves sharing stories and dreams they hadn't spoken aloud in years. Local newspapers began featuring the Grandview Hotel in their travel sections, not because of luxury amenities or celebrity endorsements, but because of the authentic human experiences that could be found there. The hotel became a symbol of what hospitality could be when it was approached as ministry rather than mere business, when staff members were seen as whole human beings rather than just service providers. 5 years after that magical night in Chicago, Peter returned to Millbrook for a special occasion. Carmen was getting married to a fellow teacher she had met at a music education conference, and Rosa had invited Peter to attend the ceremony as an honorary member of the family. The wedding took place in the same small church where Rosa and Miguel had been married 30 years earlier. The sanctuary was filled with flowers from local gardens and the sound of children's voices from Carmen's school choir, who had insisted on providing the music for their beloved teacher's special day. As Carmen walked down the aisle in her grandmother's wedding dress, which Maria had carefully altered to fit, the children's choir sang Corazón de Oro in both Spanish and English. The song had become Carmen's signature piece with her students, a way of connecting them to their teacher's heritage and to the universal language of love that music represents. During the reception, held in the church's fellowship hall decorated with handmade quilts and wildflowers, Peter was asked to say a few words about Rosa and her family. He stood before the assembled guests, farmers and teachers, hotel guests who had become friends, children from Carmen's choir, nursing colleagues of Maria's, and felt the presence of Miguel as strongly as if he had been standing beside them. 5 years ago, Peter began, I met Rosa Martinez on a rainy night at the Grandview Hotel. I thought I was stopping for a simple overnight stay, but instead, I discovered something I hadn't even realized I was looking for, a reminder of what music is really about. He paused, looking around the room at faces that reflected the diversity and richness of small-town America. Rosa taught me that the most important audiences are often the smallest ones, and that the most powerful performances happen when we share our authentic selves with generous hearts. She showed me that dreams don't die when we set them aside for more pressing responsibilities. They transform and find new ways to touch the world. Today, as we celebrate Carmen's marriage, I see those dreams living on in new forms. In Maria's healing hands as she cares for patients who need both medical skill and human compassion. In Carmen's classroom, where she teaches children that music is a birthright, not a privilege. In Rosa's daily work at the hotel, where she creates a space of welcome and beauty for travelers who need both rest and recognition of their humanity. Peter's voice grew stronger as he reached his conclusion. Miguel Martinez lives on in the love his family continues to share with the world. In the songs his wife still sings, in the dreams his daughters are building with their own lives. That night at the Chicago Theater wasn't really about one performance. It was about the truth that authentic love and authentic music are the same thing, and that both have the power to change lives in ways we might never fully understand. The reception continued late into the evening, with music provided by a combination of Maria's boyfriend on guitar, Carmen's husband-to-be on piano, and Rosa herself, who sang traditional songs that connected the celebration to generations of family celebrations that had come before. Peter stayed until the very end, helping to clean up and sharing stories with 3 generations of the Martinez family.